Hello there, and welcome to my look at Combat Patrols issue 39 and 40. This week we've got two humdingers. We have some Wraithguard for the Aeldari, which are absolutely fantastic. We got all three sprues of those. We also get some data cards and some scenery, which is just dreadful. I hate this cardboard scenery, to be honest, but you know, it is what it is. And with issue 40, we get 5 Chaos Terminators, including the bases. So, starting with issue 39, and as I struggle to get it open, we start with the how to build stuff. And naturally, this isn't going to take too long whatsoever. There's not really much to these guys. These are definitely going to be a lot easier to build than the Terminators. And I'm quite looking forward to having these guys. I've always wanted some of these in my Aeldari collection, and now I've got my hands on them. And after snipping these sections from their sprues, giving them a good clean and gluing them together, they aren't too difficult whatsoever. The arms are a little bit fiddly, but just take some time with it and you'll be perfectly fine. Once again, though, there is a mistake. In the book, we show parts 40 and 41 twice. The second two are basically 42 and 43, though. It's not too much of an issue, though, and these models look absolutely fantastic. Really happy with them. Can't wait to get to the next stage. So now we've stuck those guys together, we're on to the how to paint guide. Once again, it's going to tell you to undercoat them by hand. Don't do that. I'll show you why in a second. There's not too much to these guys. There's not very many steps, so they're not going to take very long to paint whatsoever. In fact, they only took me around about 2 hours to get them to the stage that they need to be. Always spray your models, never undercoat them. It takes too long and it's very, very tedious. I always use Colourforge. This is Sand Green Red, which is basically the same as Mephiston Red. It's definitely well worth investing in Colourforge stuff as well, because as you can see, the difference in the can size is massive. So, as I said earlier, they're not very difficult to paint whatsoever. Best thing to do, in my opinion, is to actually paint the black first, as it's going to be very easy to accidentally get that black on the red. Even if you do take your time, there's still going to be the occasional slip up. So I did the black first, then I did the red, followed by the rest of the colours. But always keep that Mephiston Red handy, because there will be times when you occasionally spill the paint over. After you got the base coats down, it's then on to the wash. The wash is nice and simple and super fast to do. Make sure you've got a nice thin wash when you're doing the Agrax Earthshade to just line all of the armour, and they'll end up looking absolutely fantastic. As you can see, like I said, didn't take too long whatsoever either. I love doing the Aeldari because they're so simple and quick to paint. And, well, when it comes to highlighting as well, there's not going to be much left to do. Fantastic models. Following the paint guide, we've got our table for naming our Wraithguard. It's something I haven't actually done yet. And behind that is the datasheet. Speaking of which, we also got the datasheet for the Wraithguard, and we got it for the Terminators in this set, plus some stratagems and reminders for like the power or unit powers, and some terrain, as they like to call it. And we got the data cards for the orcs. So, super excited. Super excited about the orcs. Anyway, before I get too distracted with orky behaviour, the next is more rules about strategic reserves, and then we're going to be looking at the terrain features. We've got quite a few pictures of examples here and explanations on how to use them in the battlefield. Of course, if you're brand new to the hobby, you won't have any of this, or you won't have much. You might have picked up their £75 set they did, which is actually a bargain. If you haven't taken advantage of it, do take advantage of it, because it is well worth the money. And then it goes on to explaining how you can actually use your terrain cards in the battlefield to represent what you're actually going to be using on the on the tabletop. These terrain cards do come in handy, but definitely think about getting some actual physical terrain. After that, we then got Scenario 25, Ghost Vanguard, which is our Aeldari go against some Chaos. It's just a straight up fight for control of the objective markers that are on the battlefield, and we're getting to use our brand new terrain rules. And of course it wants us to use both battle mats 1 and 2, so we'll get those ready, and then we'll place a few bits of the terrain. I'm only going to put down 3. I don't want to put down sort of loads, as there's not really that much space, and I don't want to overwhelm the board. And so with our terrain in place, our forces are our 5 brand new Wraith Lords, 10 Guardian Defenders with the weapons platform, 3 Wind Riders, and the Aeldari Farseer. And they're up against 10 Chaos Legionnaires, 5 Chaos Havocs, and finally the Dark Disciple with his 2 Acolytes. This battle has no attacker or defender, so it's a straight up fight. So I'm going to do a roll to see who goes first after I've deployed, but it does state that the Chaos get deployed first, so that's what I'll do. I'm also going to use the enhancements and things like that. For the Chaos, I'm going to use the Infernal Blessing, giving him a 5+ Feel No Pain. And for the Aeldari, I'm going to use Eldritch Might. There's not much to deploy and it's not going to take long whatsoever, but the Chaos are going to take full advantage of the objective that they're next to, and the Havocs will be claiming that. And the Aeldari Wraith Lords have to be placed in Zone 1, so that's what they'll be placed, and this is what the deployment looks like after everything's been set up. I'm also going to make the roll for the Strands of Fate for our Aeldari Farseer, and I'm quite satisfied with that roll, so I'll leave it there. For the roll-off to see who goes first, Chaos got a 1 and Aeldari scored a 3, so they'll be taking the first turn. The only unit for the Aeldari this turn that's going to move is the Wraithguard, as the other 2 units are quite happy in their positions next to the objective markers. They move 6 inches, so they're going to get quite close to those Legionnaires straight away. In the shooting phase, the Wind Riders are going to kick things off with their Scatter Laser and 2 Shuriken Catapults. They're going to fire at the Legionnaires, and the Shuriken Catapults fired first. Thankfully, they can re-roll 1s. But they still managed to fail hitting with 1 shot. The wound roll was fairly decent. It managed to do 2 wounds, and the Legionnaires managed to fail 1 wound, meaning that they've taken 1 damage. The Scatter Laser, on the other hand, wasn't actually playing around, and this time managed to score 4 hits. They then scored 4 wounds, but the Legionnaires this time managed to block all of those shots. However, unfortunately for those Legionnaires, the rest of the Aeldari units are actually going to concentrate their fire on them and try and take them out this turn. The Guardians getting 20 shots, so I rolled 10 at a time. Unfortunately, though, they weren't all as good as shooting as the Wind Riders, but they did manage to get 15 hits in total. I'll be rolling 12 dice, and if need be, I'll get 3 rerolls out of that. And it looked like I needed them, as I only managed to get 8 wounds in total. And thanks to that -1 on the AP, the Legionnaires failed 6 saves. So that's another 3 Legionnaires out off the battlefield. It's not over for the Guardians, though. They're now going to use their Star Cannon. 5 out of the 6 shots managed to hit. And out of those 5 hits, 4 managed to wound. However, the Star Cannon is -3 for the AP, and unfortunately for those Legionnaires, they lost another 3 models. The combined shooting of the Aeldari is doing absolute wonders for taking out that horrible, horrible protective marine armour. The Farseer then fancied a shot at the Legionnaires as well, and using his Eldritch Storm, he managed to roll 3 attacks, 2 of which hit, both of which wounded. And thanks to its -2 AP, the Legionnaires failed 2 more saves, meaning they took die 3 damage each. The first one was 2, and the second was just 1 damage. So that's another 1.5 Legionnaires off the battlefield. Lastly, for the Aeldari, the Wraithguard are going to take their shots. I'm quite excited about using these guys, and hopefully they're going to mop up the rest of the unit. However, they do need 4s to hit, so it's about 50-50 with their chances. However, 4 of the 5 dice did hit, but 1 was slightly cocked, so I re-rolled that, and sadly that didn't make it. As the strength of the weapon is 14, they only needed 2s to cause any wound, and all 4 of them managed to cause a wound. And with the AP being -4, the Marines didn't get any save, and they took a massive amount of damage as a die 6 +1, meaning the Legionnaires did get wiped off the board in this single turn. So it's not looking good for Chaos in their first turn. The Havocs naturally are going to stay where they are, claiming that objective marker, but the Dark Apostle is going to move as far forward as he can, because he wants to give a good old clout to the Guardians. So, starting with the shooting, the first thing that's going to happen is the Heavy Bolter is going to fire at the Wind Riders. And he managed to score 2 hits. followed by 1 wound, but that wound was good enough to cause 1 piece of damage to the Wind Riders. Next up, the Reaper Chain Cannon is going to have a shot with its whopping 8 attacks. It managed to only miss with 1, and then only 1 of those hits failed to cause any damage. And even though there's no AP whatsoever, that Reaper Chain Gun managed to wipe out the remaining Wind Riders. This is a perfect example of just how vulnerable and weak the Aeldari saves can be, especially against heavier units. The Havoc missile launcher then decided to fire a crack missile towards the Wraithguard, but unfortunately for him, while he hit, he failed to cause any wounds. The last cannon then decided to take his shot. He managed to roll a cocked dice, so I re-rolled that. He still managed to hit with that, and he caused a wound. And unfortunately for one of the Wraithguard, he managed to fail his save, meaning one of the Wraithguard has been taken off the board. Lastly, for the Havocs, the Aspiring Champion and his Plasma Gun decided to fire. He's in rapid fire range as well. He managed to hit with 2, but he only managed to wound with 1, and that wound was then promptly saved by the Wraithguard. The Dark Apostle didn't want to fire, risking causing a wound and making that distance. He had to travel even further, because unfortunately for him, he still managed to fail the distance. Even with the loss of the Wind Riders in the first turn, they're still looking pretty good for the Aeldari, as they're claiming the second objective, meaning they get 5 victory points. So once again, the Wraithguard are going to continue their march forward, heading straight towards the Havocs, while the Guardians are going to stay where they are, and they're going to fire at the Dark Apostle. Once again, rolling 20 dice, there's still 10 of them. This time they missed with 3 in the first salvo, and only 2 with the second. Rolling 15 wound dice, they managed to cause quite a few bits of damage to the Dark Apostle, but his armor held, and he only lost his 2 Dark Disciples and 1 wound. It was at this stage that I noticed that I used the Star Cannon wrong last time. It actually only received 2 shots, and I actually rolled, I think it was 6. So instead of actually firing this turn, I'm going to leave it and not use it. Sometimes mistakes like this do happen, so I'm just going to roll with it and not worry about it. So skipping ahead to the Farseer, he's going to use one of his Strands of Fate dice to cause or to cast his Eldritch Storm, and there's a nice big fat juicy 6 there, so I'm going to use that for the amount of attacks. He hit with 4, but he did score 2 1s, and I'm also using his Eldritch Might, which means I can re-roll 1s with psychic attacks, and he only failed to hit with 1. 4 of those 5 attacks managed to go through, but even with his invulnerable save, 3 out of the 4 attacks managed to get through. This caused 6 wounds, but unfortunately he managed to fail his Feel No Pain save, so he's removed from the board. It's really not looking good for the Chaos at this stage. Especially as next up, the Wraithguard, and they're naturally going to take fire at the Havocs, trying to eliminate as many as they can. However, one of them missed, but all 3 of those shots managed to wound. They then caused quite a large amount of damage, removing 3 of the Havocs off the board. So we took away the Missile Launcher, the Heavy Bolter, and the Aspiring Champion. It's not looking great for the Chaos this turn whatsoever, as they're almost all gone. But we need to take a battle shock test to see if they can claim that objective. We need a 6 or more on 2 dice, which we managed to roll, meaning they score 5 victory points. Obviously, they'd be fools if they were going to move anywhere, so they're just going to concentrate their fire onto the Wraithguard. Starting with the las cannon, naturally he misses his shot, so the chain gun had his go, and he didn't fare much better whatsoever, missing with the vast majority of his shots, only hitting with 4 of them, and out of those 4, sadly only 3 of them managed to cause any wounds. But one of them did manage to get through, meaning the Wraithguard took 1 piece of damage. That wound is probably going to be the last gasp of these poor Havocs. As turn 3 for the Aeldari begins, there's no hope for the Chaos, but the Aeldari are still in charge of that second objective, meaning they gain another 5 victory points. The Wraithguard moved up their full 6 so they can get as close as possible to those last 2 poor Havocs. But before they get their turn, the Farseer is going to shoot at those. We're going to completely ignore the Star Cannon again, as I messed up on the last go. But we're going to use the Strands of Fate and use 5 dice. 4 of which hit, and out of those 4, 3 cause some wounds. But sadly for those Chaos Marines, all 3 of those wounds failed, as it is -2 on the armor save. So off went the last cannon, and the chain gunner received 1 wound in the vague hope that he might survive what's about to hit him. And with those Wraithguard bearing down on him, to be honest, he did actually get fairly lucky. The Wraithguard only managed to hit with 2. And out of those 2, only 1 managed to wound, but he was not going to get an armor save from that, so he's removed from the battlefield. A fairly quick and simple scenario for the Aeldari versus Chaos, with an Aeldari victory of 10-5. I've got to say, I absolutely love those Wraithguard. They've done a fantastic job, and I can't wait to use them in future battles. That means the Aeldari have a victory, and on the back page we've got our victory blurb, and then a lovely splash shot of what else is available to buy for the Aeldari from the range. So moving on to issue 40 and opening that up, the first thing we're confronted with is the how to build as normal. These guys are fairly easy to build. It looks more complicated than it is because there's a lot more steps than there are with the Aeldari Wraithguard. Personally, I've always wanted some Chaos Terminators. It's one of those units that I've always been on the back burner but never managed to get hold of, so I'm super excited about getting hold of these guys. And with a snip, a scrape, and a glue, that's these guys put together, and I've got to say they're absolutely fantastic looking models. There's still options left on the sprue as well if you want to change things up a bit, or you just want to put them in your bits box. And with the building out of the way, we're on to the painting. Once again, it's going to ask you to hand undercoat these models. Don't do that, just get yourself some nice matte black spray from Colourforge, does wonders. There's a few more steps involved with these guys, as they're a little bit more detailed than the Aeldari Wraithguard, but just take your time. They shouldn't take too long. They only took me around about 4 hours to completion. Always remember as well, keep that Abaddon black handy, because there will be times when you mess up and accidentally go onto the black. Not a problem though, very easy to sort out. It's been pretty interesting painting Chaos. They're not my favourite models to paint, again, basically because of all of those trims and such on the armour. It can be a bit fiddly and a bit of a pain in the backside, but the finished products always do look absolutely phenomenal. Saying that though, having lots of detail can be quite handy, because at the end of the day that will make you a more confident painter, and you'll learn that mistakes are perfectly fine, and it'll definitely teach you brush control, which is the most important skill to have as a painter. And there we are, that's our lovely Chaos Terminators, all painted and ready for the next batch of paints, which will start to be the highlighting phase. Continuing with the magazine, after the painting we've got our little naming table for the Chaos Terminators, and then after that we've got our data sheet, but we've also got the physical copy that came with the last issue as well. And this is followed by a brand new core mission. However, because I've already done one battle report, and for some reason after this there's another battle report, I'm only going to be doing the second battle report, not the full one. So hopefully I'll be able to fit in this new mission at a later date. The next scenario though is scenario 26, Chaotic Ambush, and sees our Aeldari once again face off against the Chaos. It's also still helping us get to know our terrain rules, and it uses battle mats 1 and 2. We are getting some new ones very soon, I'm pretty certain, so these ones will go by the back burner. Once we set up our terrain, we're just going to put a couple of pieces in each of the terrain sections, and then we've placed our objective markers. It's basically just going to be a stand-up fight over those objective markers. So for the Aeldari, once again, we've got our Aeldari Wraithguard, absolutely fantastic models, I'm really loving them, some of my favourites. Then we've got 10 Guardians, plus their weapons platform. And of course, the Aeldari Farseer. On the Chaos side, we've got 10 Legionnaires. Of course, our brand new, freshly painted Chaos Terminators. And lastly, our Dark Apostle and his 2 Dark Disciples. Looking at the deployment rules, the Chaos Space Marines set up first, and then we sort out terrain. However, I've already set up the terrain because it's only me, and I was just going to set it up like that anyway. So the Chaos Space Marines get deployed, followed by our Aeldari. Being pretty happy with the deployment. There's not very many units, so the deployment's not going to be hugely massive. This is going to be a very fast battle, I think, but we're still going to use our enhancements. For Chaos, once again, we're going to use the Feel No Pain ability, and for the Aeldari, we're going to use Eldritch Might, as that came in quite handy in the last game. For the Strands of Fate, I wasn't very happy with the first roll, so I re-rolled, and I'm happy with the second result. And with both armies now set to battle, all that's left to do is to do the roll-off. The Chaos Space Marines scored a 4, and the Aeldari, unfortunately, only scored a 1. Naturally, the very first thing the Chaos are going to do is they're going to surge forward to get as close to the objective markers as they can. No one's going to advance. We're just going to take it nice and slow so we can shoot on the way. All 3 units moved up. Now, the slowest unit at the moment are the Chaos Terminators, as obviously they're a bit chunkier and they only move 5 inches. I just think I placed the Dark Disciple a little bit poorly, as he's got to do a bit of a diversion. Legionnaire is going to kick off the shooting with 4 of their bolters. Everything else apart from the heavy bolter is out of range, and we've only got 4 bolters to use. All 4 shots hit. 3 of those shots manage to cause a wound, as they need 3s to wound. And if we scale up the terrain to be 3D, those Guardians will be in cover, so there's going to be a 3+ for them to save as they get their +1 bonus, but sadly, one of them failed to save. The Heavy Bolter is also going to fire at the Guardians, as we want to try and reduce their numbers to stop them from scoring any objective markers. He scored a hit with all 3 shots, but only managed to wound with 2 of them. However, thanks to his -1 AP, 2 Guardians were still lost. The Dark Disciple is out of range, everything, so he's going to sit back and chill and just take notes while the Terminators go into action. We're going to use their combi bolters first of all, so there's 2 shots each at strength 4. So as always, Chaos Space Marines need 3s to hit. They managed to hit with every single shot. However, they weren't as lucky when it came to wounding, even though they only needed a 3. However, once again, that terrain saved the Guardians' lives, as only 2 more were lost. However, it's now time for the heavy weapon of the group, the Reaper autocannon. This thing gets 4 shots off, needing 3s to hit, and it's strength 7 as well, meaning it needs 2s to wound. It also has sustained hits 1, which means with those 2 6s we get 2 additional hits. And with those 2s to wound, only 1 failed, but unfortunately for the Guardians, most of those wounds managed to get through, and that took out a whopping 4 of them. So it's not looking great for the Aeldari at the moment, who have been absolutely decimated, or at least 1 unit has, but they need to make a battle shock test to see if they're okay, and they can claim any objectives that they're near, but they're not actually near any at the moment. However, we're also going to use the Farseer's leadership, as he's assigned to that unit, which they pass with flying colours. So that Lone Guardian, the Farseer, and the weapons platform are going to move slightly further forward, making sure they're embedded in the cover, and the Wraithguard are going to move up their 6-inch move. Starting with that Lone Guardian, he's going to take a couple of shots at that Legionnaire, but obviously he's absolutely terrified as both shots fail to hit. Weapons platform then followed up with its shots. Both managed to hit. However, only one of those shots was successful, but that successful shot did manage to wound, and we lost our first Legionnaire. Next in the shooting, the Farseer decided to take a shot at the Terminators, but he's going to use one of his Strands of Fate dice. There's a nice juicy 6 there, so he gets 6 shots onto the Terminators. However, he's obviously feeling under the weather as well, as with needing 3s to hit, he only managed to hit with 2. And unfortunately, only one of those managed to actually make it through. And make it through it did, as the Terminator failed his armor save. So that's 1 wound for the Terminators. However, the Wraithguard are going to see what they can do, as they're going to concentrate their fire on those Terminators as well. And needing 4s to hit, they managed to fire spectacularly. Actually loving these Wraithguard, they haven't let me down yet. All of those shots managed to wound as well, as the strength of this weapon is 14. They also can't save against such powerful attacks, meaning they received a boatload of damage, and we lost 4 out of our 5 brand new Terminators. It's looking pretty even at the beginning of turn 2, with both armies almost lost an entire unit each. Speaking of which, that Chaos Terminator needs to pass its Battle Shock test, and pass it does, but only barely. He then decides to head closer to the second objective, as the Legionnaires move past Objective 3 as they want to get their hands on those Wraithguard. The Dark Apostle is just going to simply advance along with the Terminator. In the shooting phase, once again beginning with the Legionnaires, their bolt guns are now in rapid fire range, so they're going to start firing at those Wraithguard, managing to get 5 hits in the process. However, the Wraithguard are the toughest guys on the battlefield at the moment, so they'll need 5s to wound, which they receive 2. But only one of those wounds managed to get through. So that's 1 wound on the Wraithguard. Next up, there's 2 bolt pistols that are also going to take their shots. However, only one of those guys hit, and they managed to wound, but that wound was successfully saved. Next up was the Heavy Bolter's turn. He managed to successfully hit with 2. But once again, he only wounded with 1. And that 1 was successfully saved. The Inspiring Champion then decided to fire his plasma pistol. I managed to completely forget to record the dice rolls, but he did manage to cause 1 wound. Lastly, it was the turn of the Melter Gun, however, and he managed to successfully hit. He also successfully wounded, and the Wraithguard failed his save, meaning he took 3 points of damage, taking him off the board. Dark Apostle then fired at that lone Guardian, to which he managed to hit and wound. But thanks to that terrain and a massive roll, he saved. Then the Reaper autocannon decided to take shots at them as well, seeing if they can get rid of that Guardian unit. He hits with 3, wounds with those 3, but only manages to get 2 wounds to go through. Meaning that's the rest of the Guardian's unit wiped out. The Legionnaires then decide to charge the Wraithguard with a successful roll of a 7. So, starting with those that have just got a close combat weapon, to which there are 6 of them. They get 3 attacks each. The first group of attacks scored 11 hits. Added on with another 4 attacks, that was 15 attacks needing 5s to wound. Meaning they scored a total of 4 wounds, and only 1 of those managed to get through. The Chainswords then had their fun with 4 attacks each, once again needing 3s followed by 5s. They got 7 hits. This was followed by 3 wounds, and to my utter shock and disbelief, 2 of which were failed, meaning one of the Wraith Lords had been removed from the game. Lastly, the Aspiring Champion had his go. He's got 4 attacks, once again needing 3s to hit and still 5s to wound. He managed to hit with 3, and he managed to wound with only 1 of them. And thanks to the -1, that wound went through. With the Wraithguard attacking back with their 3 attacks, they need 4s to hit. But even with only needing 3s to wound, they managed to only cause 1 whip, and that wound was promptly saved. Beginning of turn 2 for the Aeldari, it's not looking good at all. They've only got 3 models left on the battlefield. So the Farseer is not going to go anywhere. Instead, he's going to take full advantage of Strands of Fate, so we can use Eldritch Storm at its maximum on that last Terminator. He's still got a couple of 6s left in his little pile, so he's going to use one of those. But he still hasn't quite shaken off the nerves, as he only hit with 3. Out of those 3, 2 hit, but unfortunately for the Farseer, both were saved. So straight into combat with the 2 remaining Wraithguard. This time they didn't do as well as they did the first time, only successfully hitting with 3. But all 3 of those did manage to get through, but sadly for the Wraithguard, all 3 were also saved. And with a whole bunch of Legionnaires ready to smack back, the guys with just a close combat weapon went first. The first batch of dice managed to score 6 hits, with the last few hits only managing to score 4. Out of those 10, 2 wounds were successful, but both were saved by the Aeldari. Next was the turn of the 2 Chainswords. They did a lot better, considering there's only 2 of them, only failing to hit with 1, meaning they hit with 7 attacks. And out of those 7, only 3 caused wounds, but they managed to fail one of their armor saves, meaning they lost another Wraithguard. Finally, the accursed weapon held by the aspiring champion had a go. He managed to hit with all 4 and managed to wound with 2. However, the dice have definitely turned as the Wraithguard failed to save either wounds, meaning they've only got 1 wound left. At the beginning of Chaos turn 3, and what is probably the last turn of the game, we're going to check to see how close both the Terminator and the Legionnaires are towards that middle objective, and both are in range, but we're still going to do a battle chop test for the Terminator just to get into the habit of doing it, which he passed with flying colours, meaning that we scored 5 victory points for Chaos. So the Terminator moved his full 5 inches along with the Disciple, as both of those are going to gang up on that Farseer and take him out of the game. The Reaper Core cannon opened fire, firing 4 shots, 3 of which were successful. All 3 managed to wound. But unfortunately for the Farseer, he didn't save any of those wounds. He only has 4, so he's got 1 remaining. And of course, the Dark Apostle is going to take full advantage of that with his bolt pistol. He managed to score a hit, was successfully wounded, but the Farseer failed to save. And with that, there's only 1 Aeldari left on the battlefield, so we're going straight into combat with the Legionnaires. Might as well go in reverse and kick things off with that accursed weapon from the aspiring champion. He managed to hit with 3 out of the 4. And 2 of those wounded, but unfortunately for our Wraithlord, he managed to fail one of his saves, and he's removed from the game. And with that, our Chaos Space Marines win the game by a narrow margin of 5 points to 0. A fun little quick scenario, much like the one with the Wraithguard, but it's not going to be one that I'm going to come back to. Then we've got our victory blurb about what happens after the battle, and then on the final page we've got a lovely splash page of some awesome models you can pick up after the collection. The final back page is a sneak peek at what we've got next, with starting with the Orcs and some more paints. By the look of things, we're going to start finally highlighting. It's been a pretty good couple of issues with some absolutely fantastic units to put on the battlefield. Really love the Wraithguard, some of my favourites we've got so far. And of course, I've always wanted some Chaos Terminators, and now I've got them, so I'm a very happy boy indeed. This also is the last stuff we're getting for both the Chaos or Chaos Undivided and the Aeldari, and we've brought our complete collection up so far to 4 complete collections of combat patrols with our Nids, our Space Marines, our Aeldari and our Chaos. However, there's still plenty more to go, and if you want to see how that progress goes, give the channel a subscribe, the video a like, maybe a share, and I'll see you on the next one. Which combat patrol are you liking so far? And do you have a favourite one, or are you looking forward to one that hasn't arrived yet? Let us know in the comments. Goodbye for now.